wasn't sure if you wanted to take the lid off. It'll be easier for you. And then I got you some water in case you needed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Egan, your Master of Ceremonies. It is my honor to welcome you to today's ceremony, where the men and women of the United States Air Force Test Pilot School will pay special tribute to Colonel Ryan D. Blake on the occasion of his retirement from active duty after 22 years of dedicated service to our country. The presiding officer for today's ceremony is Brigadier General Matthew W. Heiger, Commander, 412 Test Wing. Please join me in extending a special welcome to Colonel Blake's family, his wife Vicki, and their children Hudson, Henry, Olivia, and Ava. At this time, we would like to recognize our distinguished guests. Please hold your applause until everyone is introduced. From the Air Force Test Center, Major General Christopher Razzano, Commander, and his wife, Jennifer Razzano. From the United States Air Force Test Pilot School, Colonel Sabrina Pabon, Commandant, and her husband, Mr. Dallas Smith, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Fan, Deputy Commandant, and Mr. Dave Van Hoy, Technical Director. We would also like to welcome all commanders, senior leaders, coworkers, friends, and family joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, even though this is a virtual ceremony, we will do our best to follow all traditions. However, to comply with social distancing requirements, no sharing of items or handshaking is authorized. We have placed Colonel Blake's retirement certificate on display, and there will be no receiving line at the conclusion of the event. As a reminder, this is an outdoor ceremony on a flight line, so military members will not wear covers or salute. Thus, during the singing of the national anthem, military members are to stand at attention, and all others should place their right hand over their hearts. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the singing of the national anthem by Hudson Blake and the invocation given by Chaplain J. Clark.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Would you all join me in a moment of prayer? God of all power and might, we're grateful to be in your presence today. Today we're especially grateful for Colonel Ryan Blake and his 22 years of service to the United States Air Force as a test pilot, and lastly here is the Commandant of the Test Professional School. His efforts go far beyond what many of us have seen, but many of us have felt. In the bittersweetness of today, we offer into your hands this next phase of his life, retirement from active duty. As much as we're praying for his transition, we pray for his family's transition as well. His wife, his lifelong wingwoman, Vicky, his legacy bearers, sources of joy, and the extremely talented Hudson, Henry, Olivia, and Ava. May this new chapter of life allow them to hook their horns into all the goodness their newfound time together will allow. Mighty One, as they move on, may they go with the confidence that they're leaving this place in good hands, so that they may rest fully in the blessing you have for them. May they know that they are loved and respected as faithful co-laborers you have called and empowered them to be. And may their labor, both past and future, remain fruitful and bountiful. Today, as accolades are read, ribbons are placed, applause is given, may they hear in a whisper from us those words we all long to hear from you one day. Well done. These are the things I pray today in your mighty name. Amen.
Thank you, Hudson and Chaplain Clark. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Brigadier General Matthew Higer.
So good morning, everyone. What a glorious day. What a glorious morning. For those of you that are attending virtually, I'm going to do my best to describe what you're missing here physically, not the people, not the place, but the weather, right? So there is absolutely, I'm going to piggyback on what Chaplain Clark just said, there is absolutely no doubt that there was divine intervention, that this location was destined to be what it is today by some higher power. Not just the lake bed, but the weather that we're literally enjoying here right now. Light, calm winds, clear blue sky, and a forecast for all the same with maybe a touch more velocity to the wind later in the day, right? There's just no doubt. And today's one more data point that this was, if you will, preordained to be the center of the aerospace testing universe. So from Takata 2, welcome physically those of you that are here. And oh, by the way, there's a few folks standing and a couple chairs in the shade, so you're not going to offend me if you get out of the sun and save your sun minutes, so please fill in. Moving chairs, probably a little off limits, but any that are there, please take. All right. I'm here to tell a story to the 5 of you, and I never got their names. What's the Black Lab's name? Shadow and his or her wingman? Shadow and Daisy. I love it, right? I love those two. I'm here to tell a story. You'll have to translate because I speak some dog dialect, but maybe not theirs. But if you could translate for me. We're here to tell a story. And ladies, to write a good story, as I'm sure you've learned from your exceptional teacher the last 2 years, you ask yourself questions. So the first question I ask is who? What's another one? Olivia, what's another question you would ask to write a good story? What? Where, right? So who, what, where, when, and why. So I'm going to do my best to answer some of those questions today as we talk about a story, an exceptional story, and a nonfiction story. It has a hero, it has a heroine, it has a lot of combat, and it has a lot of leadership and a lot of great lessons for all of us. And so let's start with the who. So the who is obviously the person that's seated in the front. He's a little bit more humble than he even appears. I'm told, I don't know this for sure, but I'm told his initial offer was, I'll just drive off the base. I don't need a ceremony. Nope, not an option, right? We're going to embarrass you one last time, or maybe one last time, because there's a farewell after this too, right? Before you get out the door, Cujo. So that's one of the who's. But that who isn't possible without people like his parents. So, sir, ma'am, I met you 2 years ago when we had a ceremony literally in the building that's right behind us. It was great to meet you then. You had a lot to be proud of 2 years ago, and that has grown in spades the last 2 years. You know what an awesome dude he is, and that is in no small part because of the who you are and the who you raised him to be as parents. There's also it doesn't just take your parents, it takes an extended family. So to all of you that are in Cujo and Vicky's extended family, thanks for joining us physically and virtually. That also includes his Air Force family along the way, and certainly the test pilot school family that he's built and grown here the last 2 years. And it also, as he alluded to yesterday, includes mentors. You don't get to where you are in life, let alone in the Air Force, without great mentors. And there are other parts of the big who that allow us to talk about Cujo this morning. There's also 5 who's here that I don't know how to quite say it anymore. Is it Blake or Blake? I mean, how do you say it with that? Blake, yeah. So for the inside joke, the Palo Verde joke, is I drove by their house one day and I noticed that some kind of a punctuation had been made, and if it was my heritage, it would be an umlaut somewhere, but it wasn't. It was something else, and I'll let you ask what that story is. But they took the sign off the house that says Blake on it, which I guess is some European dialect for Blake, right? And I believe that's what it is. So the who's here that are the Blake family, the Blake family, I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. And we've already talked about their 2 four-legged family members that I would love to see running around the ramp, but somehow I don't think the OG would appreciate that. So you can talk to Ivy later. All right, now the what, or a little bit of the what. So a little bit of the what is I started going through compiling just numbers, right? As you review someone's 22 plus years of service and you go through a whole bunch of accolades in the form of decorations and a whole bunch of officer performance reports and training reports, it's easy to start compiling a list of numbers. The ones that immediately jump off the page to me are 431. That's combat hours, 431 combat hours. In support of Operation Southern Watch, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Total of 3 combat deployments in an airplane that this gentleman did on our behalf and on behalf of our coalition partners and allies. He spent time at Jabber twice, and then the third time was, at the deed, right? So, and then along the way, he did a lot of things. I'm not going to list the number of hours, the number of sorties, the number of targets, the number of coalition lives saved, right? But it is steep in the record, and you know it in your heart, Cujo, that you made a huge difference to a lot of American families that got to welcome back their loved one and not get a gold star in front of their house. In testament to that, 4 air medals on this gentleman's uniform. That is not uncommon to have multiple air medals in our generation of airmen and women, as we've been in combat now for going on 3.5 decades. But I'll tell you what's not common: Distinguished Flying Crosses. And he has 2. That in and of itself, Cujo, is a complete combat aviation career. In one of those DFCs, he flew an 8.3 hour mission, right? Who's been in an airplane 8.3 hours and at the controls in the crowd? There won't be many hands that go up. Now, know that you're sitting in the seat the whole time. You can't get up and stretch, right? That is an enduring event or challenging event by itself. Now it was at night. It included 6 air refuelings, and he got to the target area, and his flight lead's aircraft malfunctioned. So it was up to Cujo, and I'll say his better half sitting, 8 feet, 10 feet behind him, to make sure that all the weapons hit a target, which is what we train to in that bomb-dropping part of the world, right? We train to that. The reason that this was just that much more special and impressive was that around that target area were a whole bunch of things that you shouldn't hit, like coalition forces, like a mosque, like other things. And the after-action reports were no damage, no collateral damage, target destroyed because of that man and the combat warrior that was his Wizzo sitting behind him. That is one of many whats that he did in a career spanning 22 years. 65 aircraft, 3,060 hours, according to one of your records and counting, is an important thing to add. That's a little bit of the what. The where. It's a full circle. It's a circuitous circle, maybe not an exact circle, but the wheres, other than your deployments, maybe a couple TDYs, are all CONUS, which is also an interesting thing as you review somebody's. He chose a bomb-dropping platform out of Shepherd, like multiple other people in this audience. He was a DG there. He went from there to Seymour Johnson, and from there deployed twice as a lieutenant. One of the things that's interesting as you read somebody's life as recorded on paper is that it gives insight into other things that may not be otherwise obvious. Did any of you, and maybe even kids, did you know your dad's a historian? Vicky, did you know that he was a historian? Yeah, so he was the officer that volunteered to write his squadron's history during that deployment in the early stages of Operation Enduring Freedom in the post 9/11 era. So, Cujo, if Lockheed doesn't work out for you, I know lots of great history jobs in the Air Force that you might have a little bit in common with. All right, more wares. From Seymour Johnson to Mountain Home, as I talked about, he completed upgrades quick there, went back to Seymour Johnson. There's a couple names that surface in your records there. Mikey Duvall and I served in Afghanistan shortly after he was your OG, and many of you may have heard the last name Holmes. That was your wing commander there. It's fascinating to see how people's careers and life pass cross. There he upgraded to instructor pilot examiner quickly, and then decided that academia was a little bit more in tune, so he applied to AFIT TPS, got accepted, literally aced the program in AFIT. The only person through his master's degree class with a GPA of 4.0. TPS, where he won the CDOT award. So as you leave the building today, look at that. It's an inert weapon, but look at the CDOT award in the auditorium as you walk out. His name is forever engraved on that. That award is given to someone that best exemplifies the warrior spirit in a TPS class. And clearly he had it, and his class recognized it. From there he went to Eglin, where as a major he finished as the director of operations in a fighter test squadron, the 40th. He went from there to the Pentagon, SAF-AQ. He was a PEM, and if you want to know what a PEM is, I'm not going to answer that question today, but I worked with a lot of them, including this guy, and that was from there. He also deployed to a non-flying job in the Middle East and Iraq. After SAF-AQ, he and the family moved to Las Vegas, where he commanded for the first time. He then went to Stanford, to Eglin, where he commanded for the second time, and then he came here for his third command, as you know. And now they're completing the circle, or whatever the geometric shape is, and going right back to Texas, where it all started. If I count right, Vicky, 14 PCSs? Is that the number? Yeah, so that's a big number. And there's no doubt a lot of sacrifice, a lot of lost things and broken things along the way there, too. But there's the where, folks. The wins are a little bit included there also. His life path started, or his Air Force life path started in December of 1997 at his commission date, and that's when this citizen soldier put on the uniform for the first time. The win also, I want to tie back into a couple of the people involved. So when your mentors, when your parents, when your extended family did things that nudged you in the direction of the Air Force, when they did that, I'm sure they had an inkling of what could happen and what was possible. And so for that, those of you that are listening that were a mentor or a family member that nudged Air Force on this guy, we are forever grateful for that. Another thing that ties in on the when, that really ties back to U5, is the when today is, right? This guy, as an Air Force officer, had literally unlimited potential. But the when he decided to transition as a citizen soldier back to the promotion to civilian was in part driven by the when. When is now, and U5 are the why. And that's an important thing, and it displays exceptional priorities and the proper priorities for you, Cujo, as a father, as an officer, as a leader. And there are things that sometimes the right call is a hard call, but the right call is obvious. And this when today is clearly the right call. All right. After when, I want to talk about a little bit about the how, right? So the how he did it is core to Cujo. It's core to his persona. He exemplifies humility, selfless service. He exemplifies a quiet professionalism. He's always understated. And then he gets out in front of a flight. He gets out in front of a briefing. He gets in front of a microphone, and it's there, right? I wish it was as easy for me as you make it look, brother. That's impressive. And that how is something that you will leave a mark on a lot of folks that you've served with that have worked for you both above and below you in the chain of command. All right. So last I want to hit the whys. I've already talked a little bit about the why, but I want to give a quick anecdotal story. And frankly, Cujo and I haven't had this conversation, but I bet it is precisely true for you, just as it was for a squadron mate of mine in Alaska. And this guy named, his call sign was Spanky. Spanky and I were talking. I was completely single. I didn't even have a pet at the time. So I had no reason not to be Air Force, not to work 24/7, 365, deploy all the time, go TDY. But Spanky was married and had 2, soon to be 3 kids. And so Spanky and I were talking about the differences in priority on the why he wasn't working as hard as the single first lieutenant brand new captain was. And that why is literally that he always prioritizes his family first. And I thought that was interesting because I said, well, what about all those times where you work late, you deploy, so on and so forth? And he said, that's the same priority. Because as an active duty Air Force member, and I know you personify this, there are times when prioritizing those that we love and those that we care about commends us, requires us to leave them. Temporarily, hopefully, but that is an important caveat that I learned from Spanky and you exemplify in spades here today. It is a blessing that you are able to return at the backside of that why. Spanky was also, but not all folks that do that why have been able to do that. And so it is a joy and a blessing that you don't have a star, you have a person returning to you at the end of this. And that's a very important why. The last part I want to drop on is the citizen soldier thing. So to everyone listening, for those of you that are veterans, thank you. For those of you that will be veterans, thank you in advance for your service. That includes those of us that are wearing a uniform today and those of you that are considering wearing a uniform that will eventually do so. It is often lost on us because we are around people in service all the time that there's a lot of people that are in the military, when in fact, percentage-wise, that is exactly not true. The number of Americans that are alive today that have ever worn a uniform of our nation's military is 7% and declining rapidly. And it's declining rapidly because the bulk of the Americans by population that wore the uniform were World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veterans. And the math just is no longer in their favor to hang on. You all know people and may be related to people that are in those generations of Americans that served. When math says they can no longer be with us physically, we're going to level off somewhere just around 5% of Americans that have ever worn a uniform. Cujo, thanks for being a part of that team. For all of you that have worn that, thank you also for doing that. And my ask of all of us, when you're a veteran and somebody says thank you for your service, accept that. Accept it gracefully and humbly, and then think to yourself, and I'll pass that on to those getting shot at today. Because that's another number I want everybody to hear loud and clear. Well, approaching 7% of Americans today have worn a uniform. 0.7% of Americans today wear a uniform. That's a less than 1% of this country, of this nation, of our nation's daughters and sons that we can be very proud of. That 1% protects the 99.3%. And Cujo, you've been a valiant member of that team for 2+ decades, more than a large portion of the folks in this nation have been alive. Thank you for doing that. It is a great privilege and an honor for me to welcome you back to the ranks of citizen from your citizen soldier time. I will now work for you at the conclusion of this ceremony, so no more sirs after that, please. All right. Ladies and the 2 gentlemen up front, you have a lot to be proud of in this guy. The more you get, the older you get, the more you learn about what your family and this guy have accomplished, the more that pride is going to grow. But I will tell you, it will never match the pride that he has in you. And I know that is not lost in you, but that will grow as well. And so with that final thought, folks, I encourage you to enjoy the rest of the day here at Edwards or wherever you happen to be. And thanks for the attention. Cujo, thanks for your service. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Brigadier General Heiger. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as Brigadier General Heiger will retire Colonel Ryan D. Blake. Yes, sir. Attention to orders. Special Order AL000884, dated 5 September 2019, effective 30 September 2020, Colonel Ryan D. Blake is relieved from active duty United States Air Force, Edwards Air Force Base, California, retired effective 1 October 2020, per Air Force Instruction 36-3203 in the grade of Colonel by order of the Secretary of the Air Force. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Every retiree receives a special retirement pin as a memento of their active duty service. At this time, I'd like to invite Mrs. Vicki Blake to come forward and place this pin on her husband's lapel to symbolize his transition from active duty to retired status. This pin stands as a testament of his service to our great nation. To all who see it, know that Colonel Ryan Blake has met all challenges set before him and has served our country with pride, honor, and dignity. Thank you, Mrs. Blake. Ladies and gentlemen, sec check. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce for the very first time Colonel Ryan Blake, United States Air Force, retired.
So we've all seen those movies, right, where they try to pack in all of the military imagery that they can, right, in one scene, and we like to scoff. We're like, that just doesn't happen. Like, you don't have, like, people sitting in, like, the perfect amount of shade, right, with the flags literally waving in the background while the helicopter takes off behind and the F-16 is starting in the background, right? That never happens. So I've wanted to do this, to live this life since I was a little kid, and to be able to finish it right now in this fashion, I think is just absolutely amazing. And folks, can you imagine, try to imagine the pride of a father who, after spending over 22 years serving his country, gets to spend his last day in uniform listening to his son sing the national anthem. Can you imagine a better way to end a career? Hudson, I am so proud of the man you've become. Thank you very much for singing for us today. Thanks also, of course, to my friend and my pastor, Chaplain Jay Clark. Jay, my family has really gotten to know and enjoy your family, you and April and Shelby and Malachi. We really enjoy your continuous positive attitude, the way you always greet us with a really big smile every time you see us. Thanks for everything. Thanks for being a great friend and a strong man of God. We also want to thank everybody who allowed this ceremony to happen today in a time where, frankly, ceremonies are pretty difficult to put on, right? And so thank you to POCO and to Tin Man for letting me use your ramp. I appreciate that. We want to thank Protocol and the multimedia team for once again pulling off a live stream of another event. Folks, I really appreciate that. And of course, I want to thank Gracie again for putting this whole thing together. Grace, you didn't have to do this today. I'm not your boss. You could have said no. But just like your name, you are gracious, and you gave your time and your effort for me. And so now I'd like to say, not as a boss, but as a friend, thank you very much. I also need to say thank you, not as a boss, but as a friend to our narrator today. So Hustler and I go way back, all the way to 2003. Back at the world-famous Flying Fighting Rocketeers, right? It has always been a true joy to serve with Hustler. You are a great man, a great friend, and a great officer. And I will forever be honored that I not only got to serve with you, but I got to spend this last day on active duty with you. So I don't know if I'm still allowed to give orders. I am retired at this point, but I'm going to echo something the boss said. And if I was able to give an order, my very last order on active duty would be to order you now to stop calling me sir and to go back to calling me Cujo, just like the old days when we were flying Strike Eagles over North Carolina and Iraq. Can we do that? All right, perfect. All right, I'd also like to thank all of you folks for coming out here today. General Zano and Jennifer, you make it to everything. Your presence and your support for your people are absolutely amazing. And Vicki and our whole family and I really enjoy getting to know you. I've enjoyed these last 2 assignments working for you. And frankly, one of my regrets retiring from active duty is that I won't get a 3rd assignment working directly for you. So maybe sometime once we're both on the other side, we'll get to work together again. So thank you very much for your mentorship. I also know that my former wing commander, General Teichert, is watching today, again from Baghdad. Sir, this is twice now that you spent your time 2 days in a row logging in from the other side of the world to watch a ceremony that I was involved in. Thank you very much for your leadership and your mentorship. And everybody else who's out here right now, the conditions seem to have worked out perfect, and there's no way I could have planned that, because I frankly was thinking that an outdoor ceremony on a concrete ramp in the desert in the middle of the summer was actually probably a pretty lousy idea. But thank God it seems to have worked out all right. So thank all of you who didn't know that you were going to be in the shade for honoring me with your sacrifice of time and potential comfort, right, for being out here today. So many teammates here that I wish I could spend just an hour talking about what each of you have done for me, right? Sorry for the decade that we've spent working together. Dave for the last amazing 2 years. Gracie and Brigitte and Al and Cody, and I've got Dave back there, and Bill and Naz Zavalas here. Man, it's great to have you here, and Farkas and Aaron and Jordan and everybody who's here. We've got, hey, Jen Harless is here. Hey, Jen, it's good to see you again. We got Al back there, and Nomas and Sil. We've got my awesome partner group commander. So, Tin Man, you are the best maintenance group commander I've ever seen. And you contributed to this great partnership that you and I and Ivy and his family have got. And I really appreciate everything. Jed's here from CE. Miss Tammy, it's great to see you again. I was hoping that you'd be out here before we actually departed the fix. Well, thank you very much. Tammy, that means a lot to me. It's great to see you here, Mace, and Lily and Carmelita there. So many friends, right? And I know there's tons of friends right now watching online virtually. And so I just want to thank you all for being here with me today. My parents and my brother are watching virtually right now, along with my in-laws and several other friends right now. And it strikes me, actually, that those family out there have had to watch most of my Air Force career remotely, right? So most of my assignments may have been in CONUS, but they were nowhere near my family, right? And so they've tried very hard to make it out to everything that they could, but just, strict distance and number of events means that there were just so many things that they couldn't make it out to. So they had to watch most of my career remotely. But their support, of course, was anything but remote, right? Most of what I know how to do today, I completely owe to them. I couldn't tie my own shoes or dress myself, right, without the support that they gave to me. My parents taught me how to walk. My dad taught me how to fly. My mom taught me how to be a loving, hardworking person. My brother was a constant example to me of a great officer and a great family man and a great friend. So I now look forward to spending many more years with you. Now, the first 20 plus years of my life I spent learning from their example. The next 20 plus years of my life I spent trying to live out their example in this Air Force career. So now I'm looking forward to the next 20, 30, 40 plus years living next to you guys again, and once again learning from your example and trying to live it out. Mom, Dad, Cody, I'm going to see you soon. All right. Special thanks, of course, also are going to go to my kids. So please, nobody ever think that this ceremony or this career has been mainly about me. I've only spent half of my life in the Air Force. My kids, right, this is all that they know. They were born into this. And you guys are the happiest, most resilient kids I've ever seen in my life. I know that things are not always easy, right? 14 moves, 7 different schools, leaving friends, having to start, new activities and getting into a new school and setting up a new home. I know that that has not been easy for you guys. But I think I am going to speak on behalf of them and say that it's been incredibly rewarding. Am I correct? Right? They, like me, wouldn't have the incredible experiences or the amazing friends that they have if it hadn't been, frankly, for the Air Force. But I also know that now they're looking forward to this next phase of life where they get to settle down near grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, right? Potentially even graduate from the same high school, all 4 of them. right? So I'll tell you folks, I am incredibly proud of my Air Force career, but there is nothing in my life that I am more proud of than Hudson and Olivia and Ava and Henry. Kids, I love you very much. And of course, the most special thanks has got to go to my amazing and lovely wife, Vicki. So Vicki has been with me longer than the Air Force has, 20 years longer, as a matter of fact, since we were 2 years old, right? And thank God she is still with me as we were transitioning out of this Air Force into civilian life for another 20 plus years, right? I know it's not always been easy on you as well, having to change jobs, leave amazing friends, register our kids for their 7th school, right? Run things while I'm off deployed or TDY. But folks, I can't tell you the number of people that I know that my wife has touched and mentored and loved, or the many times that people have pulled me aside privately and said, you know what, your wife is amazing, I love her. To which I, of course, have to say, yeah, me too. Right, Vicki, you are an amazing woman. So, you know, retirements really are a time for nostalgia and reflection. And that's what I've been doing a lot of lately. Boss, thanks for helping me stroll down memory lane there just a few minutes ago, and I've really been doing that over the last few days and weeks and months as I knew that this time was approaching. Again, this is something that I've wanted to do for my entire life, and so now to reach the end of it seems a little bit weird. But for those of you in the audience in uniform, either now or previously, can you remember the first time that you raised your right hand and you swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States? Did that make you stand up just a little bit straighter, right, and take your actions a little bit more seriously? I remember that day like it was yesterday. How about for you air crew? Do you remember the first time you ever flew in an Air Force aircraft? Right, mine was in a T-37 at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, and I could not believe I was actually flying a jet aircraft, right? Can you think of the power in that mighty tweet, right? It was just amazing. And it meant risk, and it meant that the citizens of the United States were trusting me now to stand the watch and to deploy into harm's way to help protect them. So as a lieutenant, right, that was a sobering and exhilarating feeling all at once. And you folks, you remember your first combat deployment? So as the boss said, for me, that was Mountain Home back in 2001. A month after the 9/11 attacks, we were taken off from Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho, going to fly combat sorties in Afghanistan. We took off at 3 in the morning and rejoined on the tanker at night in the weather, and we flew fingertip formation for the next 4 hours until the sun came up and the clouds finally started to part. Now, admittedly, at the end of the 4 hours, I was starting to question my career choices and decide if this was really for me. But a very short time later, just a couple of days later, I was flying my very first combat sortie over Afghanistan, dropping a 5,000-pound GBU-28 bunker buster bomb into a Taliban bunker in the side of a mountain in Afghanistan. As a lieutenant, that was an incredible experience, absolutely like no other. And I remember that deployment and all the other deployments like they were yesterday, right? I remember all the missions. I remember all the chow hall debriefs. I remember the 5-minute phone calls twice a week back home. All the practical jokes. So I'm going to spare you and not talk about the underwear bandits in Al Jaber, Kuwait. I remember seeing the sun come up over Iraq and Afghanistan from the cockpit of a Strike Eagle, right? That's an amazing sight, isn't it? I remember knowing the rivers and the highways and the lakes of the Middle East like the back of my hand. Remember how you could come up the driveway there through the Gulf and you could catch the Euphrates and follow that up through Basra and Nasiriyah. I remember how the Tigris made that 180-degree turn right there in downtown Baghdad. I remember how dark it was at night in Afghanistan. So black out there. I remember leaving for my 3rd combat deployment with Vicki holding baby Hudson in her arms and coming back 6 months later to see that baby walking. All right? For those of you who are TPS grads, do you remember the first time it was that you decided you wanted to go to test pilot school? I was 12 years old, right? And that's all I wanted to do from then on. And then do you remember when you finally got the word that you got accepted into TPS? So I was soft that day. I was sitting up at the tower at Seymour Johnson on a particularly nasty weather day. And the phone rings. Mikey Duvall, my OG, the phone rings. So when you're the SOF and the phone rings from your OG, it's generally not a good sign, right? But he says, "This is Cujo?" "Yes, sir." "All right, I just want to congratulate you. You just got into TPS." And I'm probably misremembering this, I'm pretty sure I am, but I think right at that moment the clouds parted, the birds started singing, and it was the most beautiful day ever, right? Do you folks remember the first time it was that you actually walked through the halls of TPS, right, and saw all those flight test legends with their photos on the wall? Or your first sortie here at the home of the test pilot? Or your first time flying a brand new MDS, or your first qual-eval? So mine was in the AN2 Colt, and I could not believe that I was getting paid to fly that airplane. It was an amazing experience. Can you remember your first test sortie outside of test pilot school, right? For me, it was in an F-15 at Eglin. The two other pilots that day were my squadron commander, then Lieutenant Colonel Wee Durteen, now Brigadier General Durteen, and Major Grinder Chari, now Colonel Chari, and a NASA astronaut. And so the three of us were going out to do IFF Mode 5 testing, right? So not exactly high-risk envelope expansion testing, but I really do remember at that time thinking that, like, this is not training, this is real. People are really counting on the data that I'm going to bring back to them to make real decisions. It really hit me at that time. And of course, that's the way the rest of my career in test has been, right? People count on the things that we're doing so that they can make real decisions, so they can make, so that they can get systems and needed technology out to the warfighter, right? I remember that same assignment there at Eglin, coming in on a Saturday, once again with Grinder, to shoot AMRAAMs, right? I was the AIM-120D project pilot, and we were trying to get the last shots off of the AIM-120D DT program so we could finally field this thing, get it out to the warfighters. And I remember the other thing I remember about that is that as Grinder and I were shooting AMRAAMs on a Saturday, right, like we should be paying to do that rather than people paying us to do that, somebody had to come in and sit the desk, right? So who was going to do that while Grinder and I shot AMRAAMs? It was Wee Durteen, our squadron commander, right? So he could have, right, he owned the schedule. He could have said, no, I'm taking that shot, but he didn't. He said, I'm going to sit behind the desk while you and Grinder go shoot AMRAAMs. So General Durteen, if you're watching, sir, I've taken that lesson with me throughout the rest of my career, and I've tried to live up to your example from then on out. So I remember things like that throughout the rest of my test career, right? People counting on data. I remember when I was the PIM at the Pentagon briefing the Chief of Staff late one Friday on an F-22 OBOGs problem, right? Because he needed to make a decision, and he needed some data from us. I remember as a squadron commander working all through the night, multiple nights, and working all through the weekend, right? Because warfighters were counting on the systems that we were testing. I remember as an ops group commander working through the approvals for the high-risk AC-130J envelope expansion testing. I remember setting the program up to test simultaneously two ACAT-1 helicopter programs, right? Trying to get the organization ready for that. I remember standing up new organizations to test cyber and to test fixed-wing SOCOM aircraft and to test JADM. I remember the first time that I got to sit down at Chuck Yeager's desk, right? So many amazing memories in this Air Force life that I've had. So I guess let me close these remarks and my Air Force career by reminding you all, every single one of us, what an incredible life we have been given, right? It is very easy as we go through the daily grind of life and we complete one task after another to really keep our heads down and to, just think of the thing that we're doing right now and let all these amazing moments like the ones that I've just described pass us by. So I'll remind you to just think about that, to savor every single moment, right? To enjoy your work, to laugh with your friends, to hug your kids, to hold your wife's hand, to tell them all that you love them, to thank God for every single blessing. And in fact, that's what all of you are to me as a blessing. So I say, God bless you. God bless this absolutely amazing Air Force of ours. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Congratulations, Colonel Blake Cujo. In keeping with Air Force tradition, we conclude today's ceremony with the playing of the Air Force song. While it is customary for Air Force members to stand, we invite all of our guests, You're already standing. Congratulations. Well done. For the Air Force song and the departure of the official party. Give it a gun. Down we dive, spouting our flames from under. Off with one terrible roar. Live in pain, we'll go down in flame. Hey, nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. Thank you for